Half years in World War II to include several amphibian assaults in the Pacific. Colonel Chidester was sent to Korea in mid-1950. He fought in the Battle of the Chosin Reservoir. His unit was suddenly confronted by an enemy that was not supposed to be there. 7 divisions of experienced, well-armed Chinese soldiers. The Marines were given the task of advancing through high mountain passes covered with ice and snow on their way to the border of China and North Korea. Instead, the mission changed, and the Marines turned around and fought their way back through the Chinese to the sea, bringing with them most of their dead and wounded. He was reported missing in action in November 1950. Later, he was declared dead in June of 1953, 2.5 years later. Colonel Chidester left his wife and 4 young children in Vista, California. Representing Colonel Chidester is his daughter, Mary Borevitz, a longtime resident of San Marcos. Please join me in welcoming Mary.
Yay.
Good afternoon. I've asked my sister and my brother to join me. We're the last of the 4 children that were left when our father went to Korea. My sister Prudence from British Columbia, Canada, and my brother Randall from San Diego. I'm telling the story of Korea from the perspective of the children that were left. I lost my daddy. We lost our father. We lived all our lives without our daddy. I'll tell my perspective because my brother and sister both had different perspectives, being younger than I was. I really didn't have any personal recollections of my father. He was a career Marine, as you heard from Greg. So he was in the Second World War and mostly gone. He was sent to Korea in June of '50 and never returned. When I think back, what do I remember about my father? I have very, very vague recollections of him. He took a lot of pictures, and I have some of those. He took movies. When he came back, he would take us to national parks, and I have movies from those times. I think that's why I love national parks to this day. I want to tell you about the evolution of my thinking about my daddy and the military in general in the Korean War, and I just have a few minutes to do that. Really, growing up, the predominant feeling I had was of being abandoned. I didn't understand why my dad felt the military was more important than being with his family. No one explained this to me. Our mom was caught up in the pain of not having her husband. We were not really involved in military circles. After our mom remarried, she definitely did not tell stories about our father. I know I heard from friends in college that they were military brats who moved around a lot, and I didn't connect with that at all. I didn't know what it was like to be a military family. That was not us. We just did not have a father. I felt sad. I felt abandoned as a child. I did not have my father. I think that's been a dominant theme in my life, in my whole life. So I'm telling you this perspective for a sense of remembering all the wives and children and grandchildren of these people who went off to war and never returned. Really, I grew up being angry with the military, being upset. Why was he part of the military? Why did he think being in the military was more important than being with his children? And I carried that for many, many years, for decades in my life. I fought the Vietnam War. I felt angry at the military for doing this. It wasn't until our mother died in the year 2000, which is fairly recent in my life, that I met a retired military man who had actually known our father. And he began telling me stories that he had spoken to our father about his family, about how important his family was to him. I said, "What? Our father talked to you about how important his kids were? I'd never heard that story before." And he said, "Yes. The reason he went to the service was to take care of you, to take care of his kids and his wife." And it made me really shake my head in disbelief. This wasn't the story I told myself. All my life I'd said, my father doesn't care about us because he went and spent his time someplace else, not with his children. And now I'm hearing from a different perspective of someone who actually knew him, that that's not what he was doing. And I had to stop short and say, oh, this is some new piece of information. And then another thing happened in the evolution of my thinking about the military, and that was when my sister and I went to Korea, and we brought back with us. We went to South Korea we were invited by the South Korean government. Thank you. This is the banner that was on all the beds in the hotel rooms where they put us up. We were there for a whole week. We were asked by the South Korean government to come so that they could say thank you to us. I was just amazed when I was first invited. I thought, what are they trying to get out of it? What do they want from me? Are they trying to get money from me? What's going on here? They wanted to come and say thank you. Thank you to us. And they said, thank you for your sacrifice. And I thought, no one has ever said and recognized that it was a sacrifice that I faced and my brother and sister faced in their lives to not have a father. They let us bring these home, and I have this on my wall at home. They took us to battle sites. They gave us incredible banquets and ceremonies of thanking us. Everywhere we went in Korea, they had banners on buses, banners hanging in the hotel rooms saying, thank you for the sacrifice. Your war heroes will always, your sacrifice will always, what is it? Your loved ones will always be our heroes. And I suddenly realized, wow, South Korea really appreciates us. Remember, we ran into that gentleman in the grocery store who came up to us, a Korean man who spoke perfect English. He'd worked in the United States. And he said, oh, are you part of that group that's coming to visit? And I said, yes. We said yes. And he said, thank you so much for living without your father so that we could have the South Korea we have today. That wasn't staged or planned. He just walked up and said that to us. And it suddenly occurred to me what a difference in the world it would have made if we had not gone to fight for South Korea. But that hadn't been clear to me until that time. So you can see that there's been a huge evolution in my life between where I came in the beginning as a child, feeling abandoned and alone, to understanding as an adult that he did this to take care of his family and his country, and that we have indeed sacrificed our lives, but we did it for a bigger purpose that he felt was important. I want to show to you this medal that the South Korean government gave to us. And Greg mentioned it's an Ambassador for Peace medal that we received, my sister and I both received on his part of our father. There's also a shadow box back there that we put together of all his medals and his picture that hangs in our house. The last thing I wanted to say is that I think when I look back at the trajectory of his life, he really created a legacy of people who work for peace and mediators, because that's what has become very important in our lives, to try our best to ward off wars, to stay away from wars, to work in other ways for peace. And could my family in the front row please stand up? It's just a small piece of...
Very good, Mary.